Hey everybody, welcome back to Switched On with Paul Moderman and James Wood. I, of course, am Paul Moderman. Looking at me across the internet bits and bytes is James Wood. Say hi, James.
Hi there, everyone.
And today we are it's kind of a cool thing. I think. I think it's a Bodark innovation. I think it's an approach and a theme that we are laying on top of something that we didn't see where we were. So the long and short of it is we were at SAPinsider 2022, Las Vegas this past week. And the kind of the realization is that, that conference is, while it's really good for what it is, which is education for attendees. What it doesn't have, which by design it doesn't necessarily have like a single central driving theme, because SAPinsider is not launching products. The conference is their product, right? So it's really just more of a gathering with some themes. And so it's great for what it is. But we have kind of extracted a theme out of what we saw, both from the vendors who were present, from the sessions we led, and from the sessions we attended. And that theme that is kind of coming across is with S4HANA, both on the planning side and on the downslope after you've gotten done, there's a real focus and real value that everyone is looking at, and everyone agrees is best, and that's clean core. Clean core is vital to all the conversations we had, the people we overheard, all that kind of stuff. James, can you kind of break down what you think of as what does clean core mean to you in terms of this discussion on both on the front side and the back side of S4?
Mm-hmm. I think it's, not to mix concepts too much here, but I almost look at it as treating your S4HANA system like it's a SaaS solution, even if it isn't.
Yeah.
Can I more or less operate under the impression that, SAP has provided me this digital core. It has all the core functionality that I need. I want to be agile in the way that I can upgrade it. I don't want to have to go through maybe the heartache that I might have just gone through as it relates to code remediation and migration and, all the technical debt that may have been piling up the past 20 plus years. So, it's really an effort to move in that direction, although recognizing that, nobody took the keys away from the ABAP workbench just yet. And so we can still do some damage if we need to.
And I think that's been, in our discussion before we started here, that was our kind of our wink and a nod to each other here too, is that like clearly the absolute value, the cleanness value, the lower maintenance value, all that kind of stuff of clean core is vital and apparent. And yet we all know that if you have the keys, you are occasionally going to turn the ignition every now and again, and you're going to see little bits creeping in there. Unless you have the most strict and stringent of policies and plans in place to really treat, like you said, to treat your S4 like it's SaaS. Treat it like you don't control it. And then, that's an interesting way that I'm glad you brought that up that way, because that almost kind of makes the argument or the case for next time around, SaaS is the right answer for you, right? In other words, next time around, S4HANA Cloud is probably the right answer. Or if we're being honest with each other and our listeners, next time around, SAP plus other SaaS is probably that mixture is probably the right thing for you, because we all know that both now and in the future, like big pieces are going to kind of peel off SAP for a lot of enterprises out there who run SAP. Big chunks of functionality are going to peel off into other SaaS solutions for the places that use them. The equations are going to change, and even in that scenario, clean core is probably the best thing you can hope for looking forward to enable that, right? To enable your chances of having like your either like your multi-vendor, maybe multi-cloud, but definitely multi-vendor ERP landscape come together in the right way. Clean core is the only way to make it work, both internal to SAP and when SAP is one of N big services that run how your business gets its stuff done. Well, I apologize. I just kind of rambled there for a second in terms of all this stuff. Yeah, drop some more wisdom on us. Tell us more about your thoughts. This isn't here too.
Well, I mean, that last bit that you touched on, I think the reality for, if we zoom out of our little SAP biosphere for a moment, it's, if you look at this at the enterprise level, whether SAP is physically on premises or, up on AWS, or, you actually have dipped a toe in the full-blown public cloud SaaS waters. The reality is for a lot of customers is like, I've got SAP over here, I've got Workday, I've got Salesforce, I've got God knows what else. And I'm worried about clean core across all of those systems.
Yeah.
And so the way that I start approaching business requirements, for extensions, it's not just an SAP question. It becomes an enterprise question of, anytime the business comes and asks for an extension app, I kind of have one of two options. I can either get a specialist to go in there and perform, more invasive enhancements that require quite frequently proprietary knowledge.
Yep.
Or I can go more the side-by-side extension route where I can use some kind of cloud platform and, pick your flavor of the month, AWS, GCP, Azure, whatever it is. But that's where you start to think about, all of that stuff it's not just about SAP or just about Salesforce. It's about an overall enterprise strategy, and it relates to integration too.
Yeah.
Are we going to have proprietary middlewares? Am I going to double down on something like SAP PIPO? If my entire business landscape is mostly SAP, maybe, but these days, that's rarely the case. And so, that to me is kind of a big takeaway here.
Yeah. Let's connect this clean core to the things that you and I spoke about at the conference. Because James, you did 2 or 3 sessions, and I did 1 session over the course of the few days there. And kind of while we're in the mix of it, I think you did like a panel with BTP / multi-cloud kind of stuff. Let's start there with our clean core, draw the thread through, and maybe back up to the other things we talked about. So talk about clean core in terms of the stuff you talked about with BTP / multi-cloud things with those pieces all put together.
Yeah, we talked a lot about, this whole extension app concept, and really, it's more than just extension apps, but, the side-by-side, instead of, from a development perspective, it's the difference between going into my S/4HANA system and getting into the ABAP workbench and building a host of different types of applications, reports, interfaces, conversions, forms, workflow, whatever it is. I can do that in ABAP, and I'm doubling down on proprietary technology there. I may have some skill set challenges, especially, with the new dimension technologies, Fiori, HANA, et cetera. Or option B is to look outside, and, BTP is a great starting place for this. But, more than anything, whether it's BTP or Azure, AWS, I think the theme becomes cloud native. I've got a whole host of services, and, we've just wrapped up a series on, why can't IT keep up with the needs of the business,
Yeah.
And developer shortage and all that. What a great opportunity to tap into the BYOL, or bring your own language model,
Yeah.
where, it's, I don't have to write a report in ABAP. I don't have to build an interface in PI or CPI.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not that those are bad choices, but I mean, you have more choice, and I think that's, one of the things that we were trying to show customers, and uh, people that are at the conference, that you have this huge array of tools that really haven't had in the past. So it's a
It's
different world.
like that multi-cloud equation is actually probably the best tool in your belt for that very purpose of clean core, right? Because
Yeah.
because I mean, just imagine all of the random Python and JavaScript developers laying around at any particular company these days of a certain size. If you can put those people to work with the core, working with the core, but not having to actually touch it, like
Yeah.
you're going to get so much value out of what you were doing enterprise development wise that you just weren't before, I think.
Well, I think as customers continue to mature on S4, like this is it's not even a nice to have. Like you're going to have to do this on some level.
Yeah.
Just to run through standard SAP. I mean,
Yeah.
you think about intelligent spend, that cross-cuts Fieldglass, Ariba, S4, similar scenarios in the HCM space with success factors.
Yeah.
Like, maybe you can get away with some ABAP here and there, but the landscape has just changed, and I think it's for some customers that maybe are just ECC or S4, ERP is our flagship, and we have no designs on going to the cloud anytime soon. I really think the message for them is that's fine.
Mm.
These cloud platforms still have a whole host of tools and services that can level up your landscape, because
you're not going to, the simple fact is, no matter what you do, you're not going to get away with not touching the hyperscalers in some way anyway. You're not, there's no way you're not going to do that. So bring it on, bring it forward,
Absolutely.
So let's talk about your next talk, or your, I guess, previously chronologically was S4 HANA, and I think something like the mitigating the custom enhancements and stuff like that for S4 HANA stuff. Connect that to clean core. It's pretty obvious, but make a connection there and clean core with what you talked through.
I think it's, as you're kind of going through that remediation process, as part of that S4 journey, a lot of customers, if they may have 20 years worth of this stuff, thousands of custom ABAP objects in the repository.
Yeah.
And it's an exercise in kind of figuring out, okay, here's the stuff that's absolutely not used. We can just throw it in the trash. Done.
Yep.
Then there's maybe some middle ground objects where we might use it today, but maybe in tomorrow we're going to use standard functionality in S4. That's the dream, right? As I can just start to draw parallels and add even more to the chopping block. But once you get past all of that, it's everything that remains. Realistically, there's probably not budget or appetite to retrofit that entire portfolio overnight.
Yeah.
But what does become apparent, I think, pretty soon is, okay, what is our methodology going forward? Do we, can we build some sort of decision tree that helps us to understand maybe I shouldn't use WebDim Pro. That's a technology that we might have used heavily in the past, but you know what? I'm going to draw a line in the sand.
Yeah.
We're done with that.
I think sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there. Keep going.
No, I was just going to say, I think this is kind of that jumping off point for figuring out, how do I start to approach, I'll just characterize enhancements in general, whatever that looks like for you.
Yeah.
How do I approach that long term? And realistically, the answer sometimes is going to be ABAP's your best bet, and that's fine. It's just, the last thing you want to do after going through this journey is to put your head back in the sand and just start stacking up more technical debt.
You just touched on what I was going to say, which I think is I was thinking of like an analogy of like a roller coaster. Imagine that the very tip, the peak of the first big thing of a roller coaster is your S4 go live. On the clankety clank up, you have certain processes and the way you've been doing things before you did them in S4, and that you wound up with, um, all kinds of enhancements, stuff like that. If you get past the top and now you're down on the part of it, if you're doing things the same way that you were doing them as you were climbing up, you have totally failed. Because I think almost everybody who clankety clanks up that thing and then slides down the other side, they walk away with different processes of their own for managing and mitigating those things, because going through the process of it exposes how creaky that was for you to begin with.
Well, I think a reality that's setting in for some customers, that are on the other side of it now,
Yeah.
like S4 has been a thing for a minute, and so you're
Mhm.
starting to see customers, go live. They're kind of past that stabilization phase, and it was interesting. Some of the conversations we were having with folks at the conference was, you know, the just flood of requests that are hitting their desk. And, you
Yeah.
think about it logically, it's maybe, so we're in 2022, 2019, we decided we're going to go to S4HANA. So we kind of put a freeze on things. We're not
Yeah.
going to be doing a lot of innovation.
Mhm.
2020 is kind of maybe another prep year. COVID kind of dropped a nuke
Yeah.
and best
Nuked
laid
everything.
plans.
Yeah.
And then, finally we go through that exercise in 2021 and, stabilize into the first half of 2022. Well, think about that. That is 4 years that the business has been effectively told no. If you want to innovate, if you want to add new functionality, we're in the middle of this upgrade. Hopefully S4 will make all your wildest dreams
Yeah.
come true. But if not, then now, it's kind of time to pay the piper. And,
Yeah.
that's where I think, logistics aside, part of the message here, I think, is velocity. We talked about that a lot. Just how do I innovate quickly? And
Yeah.
it's not really a referendum on ABAP or certain SAP technologies as much as it's just getting access to a larger pool of resources, having access to high productivity tools, um, even things like DevOps.
It-
The
and
ability to
and in that whole mess, de-risking the touching of your core also accelerates things when you
huge.
mix. Yeah, it accelerates the, like, if I know that I can try to innovate on something and use my SAP data, but I don't have to go change SAP itself to get that data out into where I can monkey with it. I can go faster with how I can play around and find value from that stuff, for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So okay, so the other talk which I led on Tuesday or Wednesday or whatever day that was, um it was a discussion of the UX options for modernizing and moving to S4 and SAP. And this is a place where keeping the core clean is very apparent when you look at the landscape of options for UX in SAP, especially with S4. The set of things that I think are the best options in that are all things that are keeping the core clean and staying away from touching SAP itself, right? The
Yeah.
the low code tools, like, of course, Microsoft Power Platform, a killer in that space. Appian, Neptune, all those players are letting you do the things that you can rapidly create apps and rapidly create workflows and processes that can keep you away from necessarily having to touch your core and write code there to do them.
Yeah.
Of course, killer. The same thing with some of the more advanced mobility solutions like MDK and the mobile SDKs. Those two are like, give me the data, but let me do the interesting thing on the device itself and all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. The connection there to clean core is like, it's a no-brainer. In fact, the only things that really touch your core are the things that I recommended against, which was the the ABAP and the WebDyn Pro stuff, which are technically still available, but my God, don't build yourself anything UX wise in ABAP or WebDyn
Yeah.
Pro these days. That's just silly and duh, right?
Well, I had a customer ask, what should our ABAP development team, what should they be focusing on? And
Yeah.
to me, the most possible value you can get out of that team is to have them focusing on API enablement.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
this has been an age-old conversation, of course, in SAP about
Yeah.
going back to RFCs and BAPIs, and it's a long conversation, but
Yeah.
just SAP is continually providing more and more APIs, and that's good. But building out your enterprise API strategy, we talked about it for years. It's very rare that actual procedures are put in place
Yeah.
to really build a meaningful API catalog.
Yeah.
I mean, if this is going to be your digital core and you want to keep that core clean, then APIs are the lifeblood of your entire enterprise.
Oh my gosh. So many places right now are either thinking about or executing kind of their what is data as a whole for my organization kind of question. And APIs into and out of SAP are always at the center of those discussions because A, the big role that SAP plays, but B, the number of things that were on their list that they can finally start getting to when they have reliable APIs in SAP is amazing. Like the amount of IT just requests that could be fulfilled with a solid API strategy, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
Well, you touched on some of those deprecated UX technologies, and
Yeah.
one of the things about those technologies that has kind of, I would say, stifled progress is just the ease with which developers can kind of violate best practices and design
Oh
patterns
yeah.
with,
Holy cow.
let me go into a WebDimpro controller and basically build an entire application, all that logic, all those business rules, it's lost. I
Yeah.
don't have an API around that.
Yeah.
And so, as you're making these decisions, taking a little bit of extra time and modeling an API, whether you consume it in UI5 and Fury or something else entirely, like it's not as much work as it's made out to be. I mean, it
No.
does require some understanding and maybe some upskilling in terms of RESTful API practices and things like that. But
Boy, is it just a no-brainer. Just a
yeah,
no-brainer.
well, just the repeater value,
Yeah.
because I think so oftentimes, we'll build a classic DinPro app or a Web DinPro app, and all these rules just kind of live in there, and then maybe they get replicated. We
Yeah.
have an interface that comes along, and so somebody has to kind of go retrofit and
There's
build.
always the like, oh, the way it works is locked up in this old app. Reproduce it, but don't like lock it down. Right.
Yeah.
I can't tell you the number of projects I did back in the early days of UI5, where the design answer was, we have a Web Pro that does most of the stuff. Borrow the logic that's in there, but rewrite it for UI5 in OData service.
Right.
Like that was the answer so many times. And not that that's even a bad answer for that situation,
Yeah.
but take the steps now so you don't get in that situation again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's an interesting thing about this ecosystem because not to get into technical weeds, but coming from more of a Java background when I got started with SAP, those environments, .NET, I mean, there are plenty of others that they place value on building models.
Yeah.
We're going to build classes and we're going to model different entities and we're going to, model behavior and, relationships and business rules and all of that.
Yeah.
Independently of whatever technology I'm working with. And,
Yep.
I think in an effort to help, SAP has provided a host of frameworks and tools, SAP Gateway Service Builder,
Yep.
here, just take a BAPI and plug it in and off you go. You got an OData service. What gets lost in the middle of all that is, it might have been nice if we had spent a little time building a few plain ABAP objects classes to kind of encapsulate that logic. And, that's viewed as overkill. We don't need that. But,
Yeah.
as it relates to this whole API conversation, we're starting to see just huge gaps.
APIs are a thing too. We should probably talk about just APIs in general at some point, because that really and not to wander off, but like that's one of those things where like it starts off as a techie word, but really the value of the solution there goes straight to the business.
Yeah.
Right. So we should maybe put that in our back pockets for discussion further, because that'll be a good one to unlock too, I think, in terms of okay, for our listeners who are coming to us for some kind of contextualization of things, what's an API and why does it matter to me, the finance lead or whatever, like that we can get there. It's an easy path to draw that line from nerd word to value for sure.
Yeah. I mean, having a clean core means nothing if I've turned my S4 system into yet another stovepipe system in my enterprise.
Yeah, exactly.
And
Exactly.
that's the risk.
And I think that's a good place to wrap our discussion too, because as we said, there was no planned overall message from the conference, but we really extracted clean core from all the bits and pieces there,
Yeah.
and it came up in every conversation in one way or another. And I think even for us too, both on the podcast and in our work, it's just going to keep showing up in lots of ways. So with that being said, thanks for listening, everybody. We'll see you soon on Switched On. Bye.